everyone. I'm Allison, and you are listening to Play It Forward on WUSB Stony Brook 90.1 and 107.3 FM. Happy Friday, everyone. Alongside of me is my co-host and fellow advocate of Play It Forward, Carol Trottier. By the way, I want to thank Carol for joining me as a guest co-host. It's something new that we're doing here on the show. So thank you so much, Carol, for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Momentarily, we will introduce our guest, Dr. Laura Berman, a renowned therapist, best-selling author, and a powerful advocate for grief healing and social media safety. But for now, let's pass the mic to Carol for a closer look at what Play It Forward is all about.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This is the Play It Forward Project, a nonprofit dedicated to raising awareness, educating, and advocating for the fentanyl opioid crisis, focusing on prevention, recovery, and peer-to-peer support. On our show, we will bring in experts, people in recovery, and those on the front lines of addiction. We tackle the tough conversations about illicit drugs, fentanyl, and substance use disorder. In addition, we'll share accessible resources before we wrap up. We're broadcasting live from Stony Brook University every other Friday, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on WUSB-FM. Catch past episodes anytime on Spotify, under Play It Forward, and YouTube at The Play It Forward Project. Follow us on Instagram at sbu.playitforward. And if you're a student, join our campus club to help grow the movement. Let's make an impact together. Without further ado, here is Allison to introduce our guest.
Thank you, Carol. So Carol and I are honored to welcome Dr. Laura Berman, renowned relationship therapist, best-selling author of Quantum Love, and award-winning host of the Language of Love podcast. Beyond her incredible career, Dr. Berman has turned personal tragedy into powerful advocacy. After losing her son Sammy to fentanyl poisoning through social media, she became a leading voice for online safety, launching the Grief Healing Collective and the Love Mama Grief Retreat to support grieving mothers. She's also fighting for Sammy's Law, pushing for stronger protections against online drug dealers. Dr. Berman's passion, wisdom, and resilience make this an important and deeply meaningful conversation. Dr. Berman, thank you so much for joining us today and for your incredible work that has helped so many. So on behalf of Play It Forward and WUSB, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Dr. Berman, please share more about your work with our listeners. And welcome to the show.
Thanks. I mean, there's so many places to start, but I know you had my husband on not long ago, and he spent a lot of time with you talking about some of the advocacy work we've been doing, not only to address the fentanyl crisis, but to create more safety on social media, in particular for kids. And, I help him with that, but that's really his passion. For me, what quickly became apparent after losing Sammy 4 years ago, I've been a sex, love, and relationship therapist for over 30 years and no stranger to working with grief as it came up in my practice, and no stranger to personal grief. By the time Sammy passed, who was 16 at the time, I had lost both my parents. I'd been with both my parents when they transitioned, both my grandmothers, and sort of my honorary spirit mother as well. So I'd already had and been through and experienced a great deal of loss and essentially knew how to grieve, which can't be taken for granted because I very quickly realized most people have no freaking idea how to grieve. But I very quickly realized after Sammy died that this was a deeper and wider grief than any of those that I had ever experienced before, not only because it was so sudden and unexpected, but because it was my child. And anyone who's lost a child will tell you all grief is grief, but that one is particularly intense. So I know Carol understands that as well. And you do too, to a certain extent, through your journey with your brother. So as I dove, and I very quickly dove, because I knew I wasn't going to survive if I didn't really begin to heal. And I wasn't willing, mostly for my other children, I wasn't willing to go into the zombie mode that my that I was tempted to go into because they needed me. And I also understood, thankfully, I guess, because of the work that I had already been doing, both my own spiritual work, personal work, and working as a therapist, that if mama's not okay, no one else can be okay. I mean, we're the heart of the family, whether we're the primary caretaker or not. There's something about it. And so it was very quickly apparent to me that if everyone else was going to be okay, I needed to be okay, and that I needed to choose life. Not that although this does happen often with child loss or any loss, that you can not want to be here anymore. Obviously, that wasn't my case. But I think for most of us, even if we don't have suicidal thoughts, we're not choosing life. We stop embracing life. We stop allowing joy. We don't want joy. We sort of shut down from the world. And, it takes a tremendous toll over time. So as I wasn't willing to do that. And I got the very clear message on multiple levels that if I didn't really dive into healing, I don't know what would have happened. I had already had the experience after my mother died 11 years. She was my worst, most impossible loss before Sammy, and that was 11 years prior to him passing.
Wow.
I was working for Oprah Winfrey's show. I was their correspondent. I did all their shows on love and relationships and sex. I had a 5-day-a-week live radio show on Oprah Radio, and I was filming 2 shows for OWN, all during the time my mother was terminally ill and passing. And so I did not have time to grieve. I did not want to grieve. And I just thought I could bypass it. And within a year of my mother dying of what began as breast cancer and metastasized, I, with none of the risk factors, no genetic predisposition, 40 years old, was diagnosed with breast cancer in the same breast that she had.
Wow.
And that was a huge wake-up call. I had to stop my life. I had to go into chemotherapy, have a mastectomy. It was, everything.
Oh my gosh.
And that was a really big lesson. Now, that is not to say if you don't grieve, you're going to get cancer. I don't mean to say that. But for me, I was very clear even back then that my unprocessed, unresolved grief. I mean, we know that emotional turmoil, emotional stress causes inflammation in the body. And we know that all of us have cancer cells, but what makes the cancer cells grow is some sort of inflammation. And lots of things can cause the inflammation that inspires the cancer cells to grow. But in my case, I was very quickly clear on that. And so when this happened with Sammy, I think that was all the more reason that I just really felt like I had to heal. And as I dove deeply into healing, it took me on a journey that I never expected. And what I discovered is that grief, and it requires tremendous bravery, because just like I was with my mom, who wants to deal with this? Like, we really think we can just stuff it away or push it away or shut down and not have to feel those feelings. But what we can't be with will ultimately run our lives, always. And what I discovered is if you are brave enough to step into healing, with support, obviously, but if you're brave enough to step into healing, it not only will make life more worth living and create a more connected, fulfilling reality for you, but it will transform you in beautiful ways that are totally unexpected. And not that you wouldn't give it all back to have your loved one again. But the gifts are really undeniable. So I became really passionate about supporting all grievers, certainly mamas, and I do a lot specifically with grieving mamas for the reasons I said. But I also do tons of programs for grievers in general, because it's been pretty astounding to me how grief illiterate we are as a society, especially in the Western world.
That's a good way to put it. Grief illiterate.
Yeah, we really are.
We are. It's like, I don't want to talk about it.
No.
Basically, as a country.
Yeah, because we're scared if we go there. And that's what I really learned very quickly through a series of serendipitous things we can get into if you want. But what I quickly realized And I was someone who was comfortable with emotions and could feel my emotions and, wasn't one of those people that hid them. But this was pretty big. And what I quickly realized is, and the reason people don't want to go there, I think in part is because they feel like if they go there, there will be no bottom. They will just lose themselves. Right. And what I very quickly realized is that if you are willing to let yourself feel what wants to be felt in an appropriate way, in a therapeutic way, that not only is there a bottom, but each time you do it, it only takes like 10 to 15 minutes to let it kind of move through you, that surf through that painful moment. And then you feel so much better and so much lighter and so much clearer. And it kind of elevates you almost energetically. And that's how healing happens, among other things. I mean, I talk about the 6 pillars of healing that we can get into if you want, but that's a huge part of it, is just the willingness to go into it and to face the storm. They talk about how cows versus buffalo experience storms. The cows, when a big storm comes, run away from the storm. And then the storm obviously is chasing them because it's moving toward them and they're running in the opposite direction. The buffalo run into the storm. And it very quickly passes. They have to deal with the storm while they're in it and running through it, but it passes much more quickly. And to me, that's a beautiful metaphor for grief.
It is. That's a good one.
I like that a lot. Yeah, because it does make sense. And I have read a lot of your work on grief just in the recent days, and you really have a wonderful way of explaining it in such a simple way. I mean, it does seem like something we intuitively all should really know, but I particularly like the advice that you give. What do you say to somebody when they've lost, especially the loss of a child? And I know that's a question that Carol had wanted to talk about with you, and we can certainly get back to that, but I do love some of the advice that you gave, and it was very practical. And even myself was like, wow, I didn't think of it like that particular way, but you do lay it out in a nice way. Perhaps you can talk about the platform that you created.
Yeah, I'm really excited. We just launched it. It's called the Grief Healing Collective. And it's an online membership platform. Right now, we're running a founding members launch. So it's, I think it's at a reduced rate of like $25 a month. But basically, it's a beautiful community because community is one of the keys to healing from loss, especially because the rest of the world really expects you eventually, to get on with it, right? And so to be in a community of people who understand your pain, all kinds of grievers. It's not just people who've lost children, but you can subsect off, you can all be together, but we have the community aspect. But I give so many tools, and we do live healing events with different healers. Like tomorrow night, we have a trauma therapist coming on who specializes in grief. We have somatic experts. We have sound healers. We have grief yoga. I mean, we do so many different things on there. And I do virtual grieving mama meetups and other kinds of meetups on there as well. So it's been really beautiful so far, a beautiful community. And so, yes, I give so much and lots of tangible tools and tips that you can use in your daily life, meditations you can use for healing. And I also love to talk about, because I feel like your relationship with your loved one can continue even after they're on the other side. And so I talk a lot about that, how to connect with them, how to feel them, recognizing the signs. So there's a lot, calling in lucid dreams of them. There's a lot of that kind of information on there too. But with regard to what you were saying with, how to support someone, that's something that I really try to educate the public about, because just like we don't know how to grieve, people are really uncomfortable with other people's grief. And in particular, when it's a child, and there's all of these misconceptions, like, I'm not going to bring it up because I'm going to make her sad.
You cry. You're going to make me cry. I don't know how many times I've heard that. I didn't want to make you cry, so I didn't say anything.
Yeah, That's almost worse.
It's worse
Right.
because we want our loved ones. We want their names mentioned.
Yeah.
We want you to ask about them. And it's not like you can make me more freaking sad. I mean, I'm
Right.
already sad. Like I want company. I want people to honor my loved one. And they also say the other thing that they'll do is start getting all emotional where you have to comfort them. You know?
Yeah.
That's my ex-husband you just described.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I thought one takeaway from your website on that is I think a friend had called you up once and said, I'm here snuggling with my kids and it made me think of you. And I'm just calling you. And you were thinking to yourself, I would have done okay without you telling me you're snuggling with your kids. So, I mean, it's simple things like that.
Yeah, just empathy. You know, we I think part of the reason people avoid it is because they're so empathetic. They don't want to hurt you, but they lose their empathy in the moment of the fear. You know, we can't be empathetic when we're in fear. And so when they are feeling anxious or afraid of saying the wrong thing, that's often, I mean, that's certainly the case for me. When I'm really worried about saying the wrong thing, I can be guaranteed to say the wrong thing, you know, or say nothing, right?
Right.
And that's what people do. So I think it's really about, like, if you just think about all you have to do is be present. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to make them feel, but you can't make them feel better about what happened.
Yeah.
But those people who have been the most comforting to me have been those who can sit by my side no matter what I'm feeling and hold their own. I don't have to take care of them. They can sit next to me, maybe put a hand on my shoulder or just an arm around me, but they aren't needing me to be anything other than what I am. That they ask about my child or my other loved ones, that they want to hear stories about them, that they speak their name. I mean, that's me. When I talk to grievers, one of their greatest fears, especially parents, I find, is that their child will be forgotten. And we want to know that I honestly think that's one of the reasons my husband is so passionate about, not only is for saving other families from our fate, but to create a legacy for Sammy. I think a lot of parents turn their pain into purpose, and a lot of grievers turn their pain into purpose, which is a beautiful thing. And one of the aspects of healing that can be so powerful. But part of the motivation is because we want you to remember our loved ones. We want their names spoken. We want their lives to mean something still and to be honored still. And I think that's a really important way and valuable way to support grievers.
That's excellent advice.
I have a question regarding when someone dies out of an overdose, fentanyl poisoning.
Mm-hmm.
There's such a stigma around that. I mean, I personally didn't experience it with my friends of a stigma, but I hear it all the time from people, and it makes them hesitant to share sometimes even the real reason that their child died.
Yeah.
I would just like to hear your thoughts on the stigma of, for those left behind after someone they love died of something to do with drugs. There's such a terrible stigma.
It's such a terrible and unnecessary stigma, especially in particular with regard to fentanyl, because it's in 50 to 65% of the street drugs now. So in every generation, let's just talk about young people, not even everyone, right? But if we're talking about this kind of fentanyl epidemic among the younger generation, if you think about us, like I tried stuff when I was a teenager and a young adult. I mean, everybody, good kids and good people make dumb decisions all the time. We're curious, we're exploring, we want to try things. There's nothing bad about that. It's kind of a natural, I mean, obviously don't do drugs, right? But let's face it, most people, the majority of people alive on the planet today, adults, have experimented. Tried something at some point. And the problem is now that can kill you. It's not anything. It's in everything, including cannabis. So from that, let's just talk about that first, not even people who die who are in addiction, an active addiction, right? There's a separate kind of, but what I find is I talk to so many parents and loved ones whose children and or loved ones who've died from fentanyl poisoning, unintentional fentanyl poisoning, because they took a Xanax or ordered, or in Sammy's case, ordered some drug dealer got in touch with him and he ordered it, bored and being stupid, sheltering at home, and thought he'd try something to be cool and not having any awareness that it was pure fentanyl. From that standpoint, I think I find you're right that so many people think that since there were drugs involved, that somehow that's shameful or embarrassing or will minimize the compassion others feel toward the person who died. And that's really, I think, a societal issue with drugs in general. I mean, first of all, addiction in general. So for those who were in active addiction and died, that's a medical illness. It's,
Yes.
something that we judge and that we act almost like obesity, which can be a real addiction and medical issue as well. Like people shame and say, well, you should be strong enough to move beyond that. Like basically like it's a character flaw and that's why you died.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of families hide it. I think that's so misguided. And I am someone, I mean, obviously I've worked my whole career with sex and now with death. Like I'm someone who's all about the taboo subjects and bringing that which has been in the darkness into light. And I think this is the same thing. We have to talk about it. We have to normalize it, because if we don't, then it just stays in that shameful place. Like if my child died from a drug-related issue, that somehow he doesn't deserve your love and compassion, and I don't deserve your grace and love and sympathy because it involved drugs. That's ridiculous to me.
Right. I think also it brands a lot of parents that, and I've heard people literally say it out of their mouth, like, you were a bad parent.
Oh, they say that to me all the time.
Right. So I think that's just an added thing. I mean, if your child dies from something else, no one ever accuses them of being a bad parent.
Yep. Oh, I get that all the time. I'm a public figure and I post.
That must be really hard. I mean, I don't get it as a public figure, but I'm sure people, right? They can't wait to judge somebody.
Yeah. And
on social media.
I just feel so bad for them.
Yeah.
That you're spending your day
trolling
and looking for people to harm, that you're in so much pain that you have to visit your pain on me when I'm already in so much pain. Like I think in my case, I've learned over the years, because I'm in the public so much, to have a thick skin. And I usually don't read comments on my posts, but obviously the grief or the really personal ones, I do. And it is because obviously I have guilt. You can't have grief without guilt. I've gone over every second of that kid's life from the moment of conception and thought about what might have changed the dominoes falling, But as David Kessler, the grief expert, who is a friend and really supported both of us, my husband and I, our whole family after Sammy passed, he said to me, because I talked to him about this, and he said, look, I know thousands of families who have done exactly what you did, and thousands of families who have done exactly what you think you shouldn't have done, and all of their kids have died. And so whether there's people who did what you think you should have done and you didn't do, and their kids have died. There's people who did what you think you shouldn't have done and their kids have died. It's all arguable. And, I think it's a phase of grief that we have to kind of work through and bring in grace around.
Yeah.
But what I always say to people when they make those comments to me is like, believe me, you're not telling me anything I haven't told myself. It's not like, I haven't, but I've released myself from that because
good for you.
I think I am a pretty good mom, and I certainly did all of the things that every other parent does to protect their children from drugs and making those decisions. The only thing I didn't do, because I didn't know, which is why it's so important to do this public education, is that I didn't know about fentanyl and how it was in so many drugs. And I didn't at the time he died. And I didn't know that drug dealers were accessing our children and other predators were accessing. I thought, I just said to a girlfriend, like, I'm the one silver lining of sheltering at home is I don't have to worry about my kids. They're stuck at home with me. Nothing can hurt them, So So I had no idea about that. And I could have and might have helped him or saved him, perhaps. Perhaps. But it's all arguable.
Right. Our friend Kamal, who Allison had mentioned earlier, he always says his son did a stupid thing, but you shouldn't die from doing a stupid thing when you're especially, 20 years old, 21 years old.
Or in your case, 16 years old.
Yeah. We all do. I did stupid things. Oh, my gosh. The stupid things I did.
I did too.
Yeah.
Too.
I think all of our listeners are nodding their head. Yeah.
Right. But,
but we didn't have to die.
No.
You don't have to die over it.
Now it's deadly, and it's a different world than the one we grew up in, or even the one my 27-year-old grew up in.
I'm so sorry for the loss of Sammy.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's no doubt he's proud of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I think he is.
I just wanted to bring up, because you wrote this in an email to us. Is it the Love Mama Grief Retreat? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
I love that.
Because what happened is a week after Sammy died, I was on the beach, which is my healing place, and I was just trying to breathe. And I had a metaphysical experience, basically, which I can get into. We'll put a pin in if you want. I don't know if you're into that kind of
get
stuff.
into it. Yes, we are.
I think I
Please.
heard this on another interview. But
I would love to hear it.
I'm just starting to, I put it on my podcast, which might have been where you heard it. And I've just started to talk about it publicly because I'm embracing letting my freak fly more.
Yeah.
But,
I love that.
So I wrote a book called Quantum Love that I started after my mother died, and that breast cancer journey. And that was really a spiritual awakening for me, going through that, and led me down a rabbit hole of quantum physics and the basic understanding that what is scientifically known as a fact, that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change form. And we seem solid, but we're actually pure vibrating energy on an atomic level if you were to look at ourselves. So when we die, like, the energy of what we are does not.
Where does that go? Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'd written a lot about this, and I'd always been someone who knew things and even saw things and sensed things, and I'm very intuitive, but I had never heard anything. Some people do, but I'd never heard anything. And so I was sitting on the beach, and it was empty because it was during COVID. And there was this loud, booming, but very kind male voice that said, "Do you want to live or die?" And I immediately knew what that question meant because of what I was telling you earlier. I had kind of already sensed that and made the decision, like, I can't squelch this. This is not going to be squelched. And so I said, I want to live. And then what I've realized since then, because this was, 4 years ago, what I've realized since then is that I had basically what many experts call a version of a near-death experience. Not because I died. Right. I didn't. But because in that moment, I had the physical, visual, on every sense experience of a life review. Where in that moment, and it was probably a moment, but it felt like an eternity, I was shown every millisecond of my existence and through the lens, this is the best way to explain it, through the lens of what an insane, almost impossible to hold degree of miracle it is that any of us exist. The fact that sperm got together with that egg and grew inside my mother, like, I saw the whole thing, like that, like boom, 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 all the way through, and the whole trajectory of my life. And I experienced viscerally, physically, emotionally, energetically, like, the miracle that it is to get to have a life and to be in a body and to have this life. And it was profound and moved me to, like, tears of, I don't even know, of everything.
That's amazing.
And I said, yes, I want to live. Yes. And then the voice said, well, if you want to live, you need to go away from your family and go all the way into your pain, which I then cursed you, because I was like, that is the last, I'm already in more pain than I can tolerate. That's the last thing I'm going to do, much less go home to my poor husband. And my youngest son was still living at home at the time and be like, bye,
Yeah.
I'm leaving. But when a voice tells you you're going to die, at least me, I was like, I better listen to it. So I went home and said to my husband, I need to go away for a week by myself or I'm going to die. And bless him, he didn't, he was like, oh, okay. So I called up my best friend, this woman, Tina, who is just she's one of those people that can hold big emotions. And 1440 Multiversity, which is this gorgeous retreat center in the Redwoods of California near Santa Cruz, I'd done events there for my work through the years. And what happened is Sammy had gone viral. So they reached out to me and said, if you want to escape, we're here. I wasn't planning on taking them up. When the campus was closed, we'll open a faculty house for you. I wasn't planning on taking them up on it. But after this experience, I was like, oh, that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
So my friend Tina came to get me. I don't even know. I threw sweats in a bag and brought my weighted blanket. And I don't even know. I was barely functioning. And we went out to the Redwoods to this place. And they had created this sanctuary for me, filled it with food that I loved, put pictures of me and Sammy around the house. And they basically opened the campus to us. And I was there for a week. And all of a sudden, all of my healer friends started coming out of the woodwork and either Zooming in or the ones nearby came in person. And the next thing I knew, I had this and Tina was like my grief concierge, scheduling everything. And I was doing body work and grief yoga and breath work and therapy and forest bathing and sitting on the mother tree of the redwood forest. And I just did this week. And that's when I first experienced going all the way into this pain that I didn't even know how to hold. It was so huge. And having these epiphanies that this realization that oh, wait a minute, I feel better. Oh, afterwards, oh, I know how to do this now. I've been guided by these helpers and healers to see how to do this. So by the end of that week, I certainly wasn't healed, but I was completely transformed and I could see the path to healing. I knew what I needed to do to keep healing and to move forward. And I made the promise there at the end of that week. I was like, I don't even know if I could afford this, if I were paying out of pocket for all this. And nobody knows how to do this. And there are all of these other mamas that are in my position because I'd already been, we had to start a Facebook support group because we had so many thousands of parents reaching out to us. That's how the Parent Collective, how Parent Collective got started, was because when the news went viral, thousands of parents were reaching out to us with the same story.
Wow.
So I was like, I'm going to bring a group of mamas back here. And it took me another 2.5 years or 3 years, but we did our first retreat. We were able to bring 55 of the 66 mamas who came. We were able to bring on partial or full scholarship. And I wasn't sure what worked for me would work for them. And it totally did. It was one of the most beautiful and transformational things I've ever done. And all of my same healer friends came in and we all volunteer our time. And it was a beautiful 5-day retreat. And now we're doing our second one the end of May.
It's almost like the spirit world showed you, this is what you're going to be doing for other people. We're going to do it for you first. And then you took it and you're healing, hundreds of people.
And it was very explicit after the first retreat. I was so I have never, and I've done a lot. I've helped thousands and thousands of people through my career, and it's been such meaningful work. But I can't even explain the degree of beauty in those 66 women, watching them transform and, just their body language and the smiles on their faces and the hope in their eyes. And my mama came up to me afterwards and was like, I was planning on killing myself after this retreat, and now I'm not going to. So it was just it was...
Right, what more can you ask for to hear someone say that you literally did change a life?
Yeah.
Or it saved a life.
I was meditating after that, and I got the whole program, the 6 pillars of healing. This is what you have to do. Like I got the whole
Really?
assignment. So that's what led to the Grief Healing Collective.
That's amazing.
Can you talk about, is the 6 pillars something you could go through?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go through it
us?
quickly for you, but and in the Grief Healing Collective, every month I give them a toolkit of things they can work with over the month from each of the 6 pillars, something simple you can do to kind of, because it's not, a lot of the grief support out there is in what I call the cognitive pillar, right? Which is really important, but that's about the guilt or the shame or even turning your pain into purpose, like that's all, or cognitive behavioral therapy, things like that, that really help. Okay. But that's just
Yes.
one of the 6 in my experience. A huge one is embodiment, I call it, which is about the somatic piece, right? The fact that the grief is held in your body, the ability to go into the emotions, the ability to move them through in a healthy way. And I have all these techniques that I teach for doing that that come from the field of somatic experiencing. This is like the body keeps a score, or walking the tiger, or Gabor Mate, his work. That's all in the field of embodiment. And then there's the spiritual pillar, which is, it's a lot of the mediumship, connecting to the other sides, seeing the signs, creating. I find that grief, I was just talking at it because I do monthly Grieving Mama meetups in person here in LA. And we have about 100 mamas, not all, I mean, usually there's only about 20 or 30 at each meetup, but we have them once a month. And they were talking this last one, and we had this whole discussion about how grief really does seem to be a doorway to awakening because you're in such pain, it cracks you open, and you're longing for that connection. So you're more open-hearted and open-minded. And so you open the door a crack because maybe you see a medium or you talk or you listen to a show like this, you hear my story or whatever. And then you peek through the door and you discover a whole new world. And so that is such a powerful, fulfilling path that creates faith and support and a relationship with a higher power. I don't mean necessarily religion, although many people do turn to religion after something like this. I didn't. I wouldn't say I'm a religious person, but I'm a highly spiritual one. So that support that's available to you, how do you access that? How do you see the signs? How do you connect with your loved one on the other side? That's the 3rd pillar. Then there's the creative pillar, which I discovered is really powerful for creating relief from grief because your system gets into flow, but also for expressing in grief. So we do somatic painting. In the Redwoods, we created these memorial kind of totems from things we found in the forest. It could be grief writing, writing for grief healing, things like that. And then nature, huge healer that can't be understated. And all of us know this, that when you spend time in nature, you feel better. And from the energetic quantum research, we know that nature holds an energetic frequency. So do we, obviously, but ours is constantly shifting and changing based on who we're with and what our unconscious and conscious thoughts and feelings are. Our vibration is constantly shifting and changing. Nature holds the highest vibration at all times. So when you are in her, wherever, in the forest, by the ocean, when you are in the midst of nature, you match her vibrations. She doesn't match yours. And that's why we feel so good. Also, I think it's in our DNA to want to be there. It doesn't come naturally not to be in nature, but it's a really big part. And then the final, so we have embodiment, the cognitive piece, the spiritual piece, the creative piece, the nature piece, and then tribe or community. Having a community that you can connect with, who can support you and be supported by you, who understands your pain and with whom you don't have to be okay, and who you can learn and grow with is, fellow travelers is really, really important.
That's I was counting how many of those I think I'm doing okay with. I'm missing a couple, but the community is so. I always say I have my friends, call them the grief moms when I'm talking to my other friends that just differentiate who I'm hanging with. But there is something so special about just, if you're in a bad mood or someone's crying or whatever, there's no explanation ever needed.
Nope.
And when one is spinning out of control, the other ones come in. And
Yes.
so it's,
Yes.
I
you're
can't imagine without them,
Right.
being without them.
Right. And so many are suffering in silence. And also our friendships change, when it doesn't matter who you lose, but certainly when you lose a child. I always talk about sort of these 3 concentric circles. In the middle are you're in the center, and in the middle are the anchors. And the next circle, like a bullseye, is the buoys. And in the outer circle is the boats. And the anchors are like your ride or die, who, no matter what happens, they're there, they're solid, they're anchored, they're there for you. The buoys are anchored, but they're a little wobbly. They can kind of be flaky or not really handle things or show up for you. And then the boats, are lovely. They come in and out of port, but you can't really count on them. And what happens when you go through tremendous loss or even a tremendous trauma, I find, is that a lot of that map shifts around. People who you thought were anchors turn out to be boats. People
That's
who
so true.
you thought were boats turn out to be
Right.
anchors.
That's
or
so
buoys
true.
Yeah,
turn
or
out to
buoys.
be anchors, right? Or vice versa. That's a wonderful analogy,
Yeah, I like that one.
metaphor.
Especially, I live near the water, so I really like that analogy. That is so true. Some of the most surprising, supportive people had been boats in my
Yes.
life, and then come in, and it's amazing just to watch how one incident, right, can radiate out into your whole world.
Yep.
And
It's
affect
almost
everything.
kind of reminds me of how Carol and I actually met. Right? I mean, if it wasn't for our work in this,
Right.
we wouldn't have.
We just met at a music festival, and I heard Allison say the word fentanyl. And I just went right over to her. What are you talking about? Who are you? And then
Right.
that's how, yeah.
And it changes you because, who knows whether you would have done that before your loss. But what happens after a tremendous loss, your personality changes, I think, ultimately in beautiful ways, especially with healing, but not everybody can hang with it because, you're not capable of small talk anymore. You know how short life is.
Yeah.
You don't suffer fools easily. And you go up to strangers. I mean, maybe you would have done that before. I would have, but a lot of people wouldn't have done that before. But because of what you'd been through, when the worst thing has happened to you, you get kind of brave in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I always would tell people when I was still working, they'd say, oh, this is a horrible thing just happened. I'd go, listen, let me just put it in perspective. That's not the worst thing that ever happened, And you hug strangers too.
Yeah.
If there's somebody you could see is suffering, or you meet someone that you don't know and they have a similar experience.
There's a bond.
Yeah, it is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You feel instantly connected to that person. I agree with you, Carol, on that. There's a group of women that I know who she's speaking of, the Whams. The warrior angel moms.
We call ourselves the Whams.
Nice. I like that.
I find so much joy and comfort from the Whams, actually.
Oh, yeah. Our group, we're constantly giving shout outs. It's my son's birthday. It's my mother's angelversary. I'm having my first birthday after my sister died. And everybody kind of circles around and supports.
Right. As opposed to some other people just go, I can't believe they're still thinking about that. Or aren't they over that yet? Or one of my favorite lines was someone said to me, well, you had him for 30 years. So, I mean,
who says that?
Yeah. Idiots.
Yeah.
I mean, people just are clueless. It's
I mean, they have not gone through it themselves.
Or they've been in denial. Like one of the ones that I find people say that I don't feel is particularly helpful as well. At least they're in a better place now.
Right.
Okay, that may be true, but that doesn't take away the fact that my loved one is gone. Yeah, that place is not here.
No one consulted with me on that decision.
Yeah. Yeah. It is pretty amazing about what people come out with and say, but it is true that I think a lot of people are not educated on grief, and it seems like to be one of those things in life that we just are expected to know how to do. You were talking about what is the retreat.
Yeah.
Can you tell our listeners the date, and can you explain more about the scholarship that you offer?
Yeah, it's through Parent Collective, which is our 501c3. It's our foundation that my husband and I started to support educating parents about the dangers of social media for children, and also helping parents heal who have lost children to those dangers. And so we've partnered with 1440 Multiversity, who has a foundation. So between their foundation and we create funding for partial or full scholarships depending on need. So if you go to 1440.org or drlauraberman.com/lovemama, you will you'll see even on the homepage of 1440, the Loves Mama Grief Retreat. And if you go to register, so you press learn more, and then you act like you're going to register, at the bottom of that page is apply for a scholarship.
Oh.
And so you let them know what your story is. And basically you are eligible if you have a child who has died at any age, at any stage from anything.
I told Carol that I was going to enter her in the scholarship.
Yeah, you should. Or you should enter yourself. I would love you to come, Carol, because it's just a profound, beautiful healing experience. And the place itself is like one of the healers. It's really, and it's delicious farm-to-table organic food and a beautiful campus and beautiful rooms. So you really feel, I had a lot of mamas tell me that I've never been treated this well, by the staff. The staff is just really sweet. There was this one mama who, the food is amazing, and she was sitting at the table in the cafeteria just looking at her food and not eating, and one of the staff came over and said, "Is everything okay?" And she said, "Yes, but my daughter wanted to be a chef." And I'm just feeling so sad looking at this beautiful food, thinking about what she would have thought of it. And they talked to her for a minute, asked for the daughter's name. Her name was Lily. And the next day at lunch, there's always this one dessert, a cookie, a cake, whatever. They had named the cookie Lily's Cookie.
Oh.
They named it after that mama. Just like little touches like that. They were so amazing. They've been such amazing partners.
That's very special.
So you just write your story and what you can afford, like whatever it is, even if it's $50, like whatever you can afford. Because we do feel like it's important to contribute something if you can, because every dollar that's given also supports other scholarships. So over their expenses. But none of the healers or the staff or anyone is making any money from this. We're all volunteering our time.
Beautiful what you're doing.
That's really great.
I don't think there's a lot of places or resources like what you offer.
No, I haven't found that. That's why I created the Grief Healing Collective as well. But for the Love Mama retreat, I didn't say the dates. It's May 27th to the 31st. So get on there and register soon, because I know we have a lot of scholarship applications that they're going through, and space last year's space, we had a lot more space than this year. We'll still be able to take at least 70 mamas, but there's another group on campus at the same time, so we can't go over that. We already had a lot of attendees, so get on there, Carol.
Well, I'm sure the redwood forest is very healing.
It's
just
amazing
in itself, right?
And the mother tree of the forest is on the campus.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I spent a lot of time in her arms. Yeah, thousands of years old. Yeah, it's really beautiful.
I saw on the website, is it April 2nd the registration is up, or April 16th? I saw two different.
I think they're going to start letting people, I think you can register paying up and sooner than that, but I think they want to start letting people know about scholarships in the beginning of April. So I think if you want a scholarship, do it as soon as possible. Just assume April 2nd, and they'll probably let people know by April 15th. And if you can pay and register, if you can afford it and you want to come, definitely do that. Because like I said, for every 3 mamas who register at full price, we can bring 1 on a full scholarship as well. So it just ups the amount of scholarship we can give when people pay
And
out
it
of pocket
creates-
who can.
It's too bad the opioid settlement money can't go towards
know, right?
sponsoring people for that.
I
right?
wish it could. I wish it could, because there's so much to be done. And it creates this cascade. So many of the mamas I know have lost second and third children
Oh my God.
because they turn to drugs or suicide because of the pain in the family and their own pain over the loss of a sibling. So I feel like, it's just so underlooked and underserved, the healing piece, and so necessary, because that's the aftermath.
Yes. That's why I feel I'm so happy you're putting so much attention on it. Because I feel like, the fentanyl crisis kind of got ignored for, 10 years. And the aftermath has been totally ignored about the grief and loss that we're all walking around with.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you again for your advocacy and for your husband, Sam Chapman. And again, we're so sorry for the loss of Sammy, but thank you for your beautiful work. And the platforms.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for being willing to talk about it.
Yeah, we're breaking the stigma right now by talking about it, right?
We are. And I'm just trying to make as many experiences as possible available to as many people as possible. So I did a retreat just for women grievers, not just parents or mothers, in Chicago this fall. And then I do a day called Good Grief Day that's for everyone who's grieving. And then, so I want to do a couples retreat for parents, because it's all the women who want to heal. I'm having trouble getting the men in there.
It's a whole nother show, Dr.
It's
Berman.
a whole other show for sure. But I feel that's all of what we're trying to support. And then the Grief Healing Collective, which is intended to make that support accessible and inexpensive and available to everyone, even if you can't come on a retreat. So
Are you
trying to
coming
cover
to
all the
New
bases.
York? Are you coming to New York
that's a
anytime
great question.
soon?
I may come to New York. I have a new book, not about grief, called Sex Magic, coming out this summer. Different topic. And so I think I'm going to come in June or July to do some media there.
Wow, well,
Oh, cool.
But it's yet to be planned.
I do subscribe to everything that's Dr. Laura Berman, so I'm sure when I find that date, we're going to find you here in New York. Carol and I will come look for you.
Good.
Before we wrap it up, Dr. Berman, what's a big takeaway that you want our listeners to hear?
I mean, I'll just repeat what I said earlier. That which you can't be with really will run your life. You can squelch it for a while, but it comes out with inflammation, with illness, with depression, with anxiety, with conflict. And you don't have to suffer. There is a path to healing. You don't have to go through something like this, certainly alone. You can grow through it. You can become a more self-actualized, empowered, tapped in and tuned in version of yourself. You just have to be brave enough to be the buffalo that will go into the storm and get the support you need for doing that. So I hope that people will accept the call to do that, no matter who or what you've lost, because I meet very few people who aren't grieving someone or something these days.
Right, yeah.
After COVID especially. So I think it's important.
Thank you so much.
That's wonderful advice. So everybody be the buffalo.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Berman, for being our guest and for your time today. We really appreciate it. And I really believe that you helped a lot of people today. So thank you very much. Thank you, Carol, for being my co-host.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So I sincerely thank everyone who supports our cause and understands how important it is to look out for each other and to empathize with anyone you know dealing with addiction. Let's continue to spread awareness about the dangers of illicit fentanyl and promote harm reduction tools like Narcan and fentanyl test strips. Reach out to us on via Instagram at sbu.playitforward for more recommendations. Carol?
If you're struggling with mental health or substance use, you're not alone. SAMHSA offers services and resources for substance and use disorder, 1-800-662-HELP, or text HELP for the numerical 4U for support. SAMHSA also has a 24/7 info service at 1-800-487-4889. For additional help, visit Hope House Ministries online at hhm.org or call 631-928-2377. Long Island Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence also offers support and guidance at 631-979-1700. And if you can find more information at lycad.org. Also, I'd like to mention on Friday nights, the third Friday of every month at Thrive in Hapog, we do a grief support group for anyone who's lost someone to overdose or fentanyl poisoning. And that is at Thrive in Hapog. And that's it. Remember, recovery can start with the first call.
Oh, thank you, Carol. And thank you for the work that you do as well. And everybody, check out Dr. Laura Berman's website. It's at drlauraberman.com, right? And check her out on Spotify and buy her books. And thank you again, Dr. Laura Berman, for being with us today.
Thank you.
And on behalf of Play It Forward on WUSB, thank you all for listening. We invite you to join us on Instagram at sbu.playitforward and check out our YouTube channel at the Play It Forward Project. We hope to hear from you and hope that our message reaches somebody. So for now and always, keep playing it forward. No, that was great. Thank you so much, Dr. Berman.
All right.
Thanks, Dr. Berman. It was great getting to know you. Thank you.
It was good seeing you guys.
So this is Allison of the Play It Forward Project. Tune in to our next show on April 4th at 1 p.m. Again, thank you, WUSB, my co-host Carol, and of course, Dr. Laura Berman. Our closing song is I'll Be There by the Spinners. You are listening to WUSB Stony Brook 90.1 and 107.3 FM. Be well, everyone, and please look out for one another.